So today we're going to talk about chapter 27 in the Lotus Sutra. And there's always a chance that someone is coming here new and hasn't heard any of the my talks or hasn't read the Lotus Sutra. And this is one of those cases where it really doesn't matter that much. This is kind of a standalone chapter. And whether chapters are part of the flow or stand alone is sort of up for debate. But from chapter 20, when we had Never Disparaging Bodhisattva, at least that's what his name appears to be in the chapter, most of the chapters except 21 and 22 are devoted to individual bodhisattvas, and they're about various aspects of the practice. In this particular chapter, which is called The Former Affairs of King Wondrous Adornment, this is a chapter about transformation and conversion of a particular person, a particular lay person, if you will, even though he's a king. So we haven't quite seen anything like this in the sutra. So it's a really fascinating chapter with much to tell us and many ways to look at it. So the first thing I want to do in introducing the chapter is I want to go over the people in the sutra. So if I could, let me see, I'm going to try and share the screen. Let me give me one moment. And okay, so hopefully everyone can see what I have up there.
Yes.
So the reason that I'm going through with this, can you see? It's visible, right?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, so the reason I'm doing that is because the narrative of the story is a little convoluted, and by just showing who's in the story and what happens to them, kind of with this chart, I think it makes it a little bit easier to understand. So the chapter is narrated by Shakyamuni. He is there in Lotus Sutra time, which is in time, not in time. Very hard to say. Conceptual, non-conceptual. This is the Dharma pouring forth in its purest form. But there we are hearing Shakyamuni Buddha. And what he does right from the beginning of the sutra, and in a moment we're going to read the first page of the sutra, but right in the beginning, he's telling a story about the past. And he's telling the story about an ancient Buddha, cloud, thunder, sound, constellation, king, flower, wisdom. I guess that's Yunlei Yinsu Wang Hua Zhifo. And in Sanskrit, this is the longest name in the Lotus Sutra. Jaladhara Garijita Gosa Sus Varanak Satra Raja Samku Sumita Bijna. Just rolls right off the tongue. That's the ancient Buddha who doesn't really say very much in this chapter, but this is the Buddha that the real persona, the hero of the story is the next person, King Wonderful Adornment, right? Mao Zhuangwen Wang. So the sutra is telling a story in the past about this particular king and about what happens to him, his queen, and his sons. So most of the narrative of the sutra is of this chapter is in the past. So we have King Wonderful Adornment, who is a good king, but he is a follower of Brahmanism. So he's following outer paths. And the point here is not that the sutra is trying necessarily to put down other religions or other paths, because the sutra has done this right from the beginning with its proclamation of the one vehicle, which transcends any kind of path, whether it's a Buddhist path or some other outer path. And as I've said in my talks earlier, this one vehicle is really, in my estimation, mind itself. It is thusness. So it can't be really expressed. It can be given a label like the one vehicle that we use in conventional speech, but it's not something that is really describable. But so here we are with King Wonderful Adornment, who's following this outer path. And then we have his queen, Pure Virtue, that's his consort. And he has got two sons, Pure Storehouse and Pure Eye. And the queen and the two sons are true great practitioners, and they are the followers of Cloud, Thunder, Sound, Constellation, King, Flower, Wisdom. In this chapter, King Wonderful Adornment gets a prophecy of his becoming a Buddha. And in the future, he will be Sal Tree King, right? And his land will be great light, and his kalpa will be great lofty king. So that's kind of the second thing that happens. Oh, well, there are certainly other things. But then right near the end of the chapter, the Buddha announces that these people that he's spoken about in the past are actually right there in the assembly with him. But now they have been transformed into bodhisattvas. So King Wonderful Adornment is Flower Virtue Bodhisattva. Pure Storehouse is Medicine King Bodhisattva. Pure Eye is Superior Medicine Bodhisattva. And Queen Pure Virtue becomes Bodhisattva Light Shining Adornment Marks. So if you read this chapter for the first time, second, third time, it's a little bit confusing until you get this into perspective. So in a sense, besides the Buddhas, there are really only 4 people in various stages of incarnation, and especially the king. That's really the subject of the whole sutra. And we can come back to this again, but now what I'd like to do is start reading the sutra itself, and then speak about what we're encountering and how we might look at it. So we begin, this is the beginning of the sutra. I'm using Burton Watson's translation, but I've changed a number of things to make them a little easier to understand, just here and there. So it begins with, at that time, the Buddha addressed the great assembly, saying, in an age long ago, as I said, this is a story that he's telling the assembly about that happened in ages past. An immeasurable, boundless, inconceivable number of asamkhya kalpas in the past. These are numbers that our ordinary sentient being minds can't conceive of. There was a Buddha named Cloud, Thunder, Sound, Constellation, King, Flower, Wisdom, a Tathagata, Arahat, Samyak Sambuddha. His land was named Light, Bright Adornment, and his kalpa was named Gladly Seen. In the midst of this Buddha's Dharma, there was a king named Wonderful Adornment. The king's consort was Pure Virtue, and he had 2 sons, one named Pure Storehouse and the other named Pure Eye. These are the persona that I've just gone through. So these 2 sons possessed great supernatural powers, merit, virtue, and wisdom. And for a long time, they had been practicing the way appropriate to a bodhisattva, carrying out the parameter of generosity, the parameter of keeping the precepts, the parameter of forbearance, the parameter of diligence, the parameter of meditation, the parameter of wisdom, the parameter of expedient means and benevolence, metta, compassion, sympathetic, joy, and equanimity. So and as well as the 37 aids to the way. So right there, you can see that the sons have done a perfect practice by ordinary standards of mastering the paramitas. And here they have actually seven paramitas, the seventh being expedient means. And by extension, there's also 8, 9, and 10. The paramita of vows, pradidhana, the paramita of knowledge, jnana. So they've mastered all of these practices, and the 37 aids. Many of you will know that this is really a compendium of like all the Theravadan and practices that are used in Zen, and they've all been mastered. Oh, and also and the 4 Brahma Viharas: benevolence, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So that's who these sons are. Then it continues going into the more supernatural or extraordinary. In addition, they had gained the samadhis of the bodhisattva, namely the pure samadhi, sun, star, and constellation samadhi, pure light samadhi, pure color samadhi, pure illumination samadhi, pure adornment samadhi, and great dignity and virtue storehouse samadhi, and had thoroughly mastered all of these samadhis. Now, of course, for us ordinary sentient beings, these last ones, of course, are very hard to understand. We can get a sense of samadhi as being a cause of and a product of all of the practices that we've just talked about. So this is how the sutra opens. Now we see the kind of cause that's happening here. So that Buddha, there's the wonderful King Flower, Cloud, Thunder, Sound, Constellation, right? He is interested in King Wonderful Adornment, in his practice, in his attainment. So he wishes to attract and guide King Wonderful Adornment. And because he thought with compassions of living beings, he preached the Lotus Sutra. Now, it's basically his sons and his wife who benefited from this. But now the king's 2 sons, Pure Storehouse and Pure Eye, went to where their mother was, pressed their palms and the nails of their 10 fingers together, and said to her, "We beg our mother to go and visit the place where the Buddha, Cloud, Thunder, Sound, Constellation, King, Flower, Wisdom is. We too will attend him, drawing near to the Buddha and offering alms and obeisance." Why? Because this Buddha is preaching the Lotus Sutra in the midst of all the multitude of heavenly and human beings, and it is right that we should listen and accept it. And remember, of course, that they're in the Lotus Sutra. So this is another interesting way that the Lotus Sutra is always breaking the 4th wall. They're inside what they're talking about, but now they're asking their mother for advice. How do we approach our father? Right, he's a follower of these Brahmanical practices. How can we steer him in the right direction? So the mother announced to the sons, "Your father puts his faith in non-Buddhist doctrines and is deeply attached to the Brahmanical Dharma. You should go to your father, tell him about this, and persuade him to go with you." Pure Storehouse and Pure Eye pressed their palms and 10 fingernails together and said to the mother, "We are sons of the Dharma King, and yet we have been born into this family of heretical views." So they're not necessarily complaining, and you see this is really their challenge. This is their dharmic duty, which they're doing gladly. And the mother said to her sons, "You are right to think with concern about your father. You should manifest some supernatural wonder for him. When he sees that, his mind will surely be cleansed and purified, and he will permit us to go to where the Buddha is." So now we're going to ratchet up the supernatural aspect in this chapter. So I'm going to read this paragraph, which is fairly mind-boggling. So the two sons, being concerned about their father, leaped up into the air to the height of 7 tala trees. Tala trees seem to be 70 or 80 feet, so they're about 500 feet in the air. And there they've performed various types of supernatural wonders, walking, standing, sitting, and lying down in midair, making water come out of the upper part of their bodies, making fire come out of the lower part of their bodies, making water come out of the lower part of their bodies, making fire come out of the upper part of their bodies, manifesting huge bodies that filled the sky and then making themselves small again. After becoming small, making themselves big again, disappearing in the midst of the sky and then suddenly appearing on the ground, sinking into the ground as though it were water, walking on the water as though it were land. They manifested these various types of supernatural wonders in order to cause the mind of their royal father to become pure and to make him believe and understand. So we can understand that their motives are quite pure, but then here we are in the 21st century with our experience, those of us who've practiced for a long time, and those of us who are just beginning, and people who may not practice, and we're reading about these extraordinary acts. What do we do with this? Now, usually people might just put this aside and talk about something else, but I want to talk about this directly and see how we encounter this. So it's mind-boggling. When we read things like this, when we start to think about it, we can start to see what comes up in our minds. And my belief is we can't read a sutra unless we're also reading ourselves at the same time. How are we reacting? How are we assimilating this? What kind of concepts and judgments and preconceived notions that are not in the sutra are we bringing up when we read things like this? So I get the sense that one of the first things that might arise in someone's mind is a kind of desire, a greed. Wow, if I could just do one of those things, rise in midair. All right, I'll set not for 500 feet, for 100 feet, just to show how humble I am. And boy, could I impress my friends. And with some of these other talents, maybe I could start a reality show, and maybe I could sell some merchandise and really turn this into a money-making proposition. Right? This is obviously not the import of the sutra, but I'm just bringing attention to how we might encounter these sort of things. I'm going to stop screen sharing for a moment and continue to talk about some of these things. So when we see how we encounter coming up with things that we can't understand, which is, I think, a pretty accurate assessment, we can go off in all sorts of different directions. And this is a really good time to contemplate how we're actually approaching the whole practice and what is motivating us. And what I'm eventually going to talk about is the great doubt. And I know it might seem a little bit out of place here in a way. Those of us who've studied Chan for many years and have practiced either silent illumination or Huato know of the great doubt as being something, at least that we think, is something that really proceeds from a shallow to a very deep enlightenment experience. But I'm going to talk about great doubt in a more generic fashion. And actually, to start with how we might understand great doubt, I want to talk about the concepts of Samvega, Samvega, and Pasada, Pasada. Samvega is understood as spiritual urgency. This feeling, and this precedes an encounter, if you will, with the Four Noble Truths. This is just this feeling that something is wrong, that one is in a state of dissatisfaction, right? And as we know, this is the word for this is dukkha, and Dharma teachers for ages and ages have always struggled to find a way to translate dukkha, and it is untranslatable by what the sutras actually say, but it's often talked about as stress, as suffering, as dissatisfaction, as impermanence. I'm sorry, as imperfection. And another thing which I want to stress here, it's also considered unreliability, uncertainty. This feeling that we might have deep inside us as we look to practice. This is something that many of us have encountered, and one of my teachers thinks that even bodhisattvas into the eighth bhumi will have this feeling on a certain level for other sentient beings. And then pasada is this sense of clarity of mind and supreme confidence. So we know something's wrong, but we know that we can get out of it. Now, the thing with the way that we often encounter things that we don't like or that we're really attracted to is classic Buddhism. We really want what we're attracted to, and we push away what we don't. And we don't look at the big picture of what is actually going on in our mind. And it's in that spirit that you can approach doubt, this idea of, I don't know what's actually going to happen in the next moment, and actually have a certain amount of uncertainty about this moment that I'm in, right? If we're really, really honest. So we want to approach actually all of our practice, all of our life with this kind of clarity. And the idea of doubt, of following doubt, is to open ourselves up to exactly what's going on in our mind and not getting waylaid by our conditioning, by our concepts, our thoughts about how we should be practicing. Things are clouds that can enter our mind when we could really be opening up all the time. And so what I want to read is a passage from Master Sheng, who was a 13th century Chan master, who wrote a number of works, one who cannot give rise to the great doubt. So he writes, in Zen practice, the essential point is to arouse doubt. What is doubt? For example, when you are born, where do you come from? You cannot help but remain in doubt about this. When you die, where do you go? Again, you cannot help but remain in doubt. Since you cannot pierce this barrier of life and death, suddenly the doubt will coalesce right before your eyes. Try to put it down, you cannot. Try to push it away, you cannot. Eventually, this doubt block or doubt sensation will be broken through, and you'll realize what a worthless notion is life and death. Ha! As the old worthies said, great doubt, great awakening, small doubt, small awakening, no doubt, no awakening. But for our purposes, we're going to deal with a little bit of doubt, this little bit of uncertainty, right? But I just want to emphasize that this kind of attitude is really available to us. So how do I apply this to what we've just read in the Lotus Sutra? So let's posit a thought experiment. So we've just read about these remarkable supernatural feats, rising in the air, having flames and fire come from the body, expanding and to the size of the sky, shrinking back, and diving into the earth as if it's water, walking on water as if it's earth. So let's just say, as a thought experiment, you take the position that you are going to believe this 100%. You absolutely will erase the normal kind of skeptical doubt. You say, okay, I really believe that. This is really, this really happened. This is really a possibility. So if you let that thought percolate in your mind, contemplate, you might see some holes in it. Well, I don't know. I haven't actually seen anyone really do that. I know that this is in a sutra, and I have great respect for the sutra, and I know there's expedient means, so I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to encounter this. And I don't really know how it could be done. And I can't do it. I can guarantee you that. And I've never seen anyone do things. I've heard stories. That's not exactly the same thing. So if I bring up that thought and I try to keep everything out from my believing in it, it seems not to work that easily. There are holes in that kind of assertion. So now let's turn it around, and let's say I am going to utterly disbelieve it. This is utter nonsense. Nobody can do anything like this. It just is it's a fairy tale, it's a myth, it's a fantasy, it's just something trying to bamboozle us. Okay, so if you sit with that, then that is not a seamless position either, because you say, well, I don't know. Even meditating for 5 minutes sometimes and not having a thought can be pretty miraculous. And as William Blake said, what is real now was only once imagined. I don't really know what can and can't be done. So I can't really hold on to that either. So with this idea of doubt, bringing this into how we're encountering the sutra, we can watch to see what we're attaching to and what we're pushing away. We can see that there's an aspect of reality that is sort of illusory, and there's an aspect of illusion which is sort of real. So if we can give rise to this doubt sensation, not necessarily great doubt at this moment, but this attitude, we can really we can get benefit in terms of understanding our own minds and seeing how the sutra works upon us, rather than thinking of the sutra as and the text in the sutra as some objective reality on the outside. What we're talking about is how we encounter these things on the inside. So if we follow this line of thought, we can start to see that we have lots of subliminal or just under consciousness assumptions. Well, I'm a practitioner, so I really should believe this. I really should. And then I'm caught up in this shouldness, right? And I don't know if I want to talk about this to other people. I don't want to seem silly. So then I have another block that's coming into my mind, just as I'm encountering this. And then the thing to really look at in this passage is to not be fooled by what seems to dazzle us. Because the real thing that dazzles us, or could or should dazzle us, are the practices of the two brothers, and the fact that they have mastered the paramitas, the 37 aids to enlightenment, and the 4 Brahma Viharas. All of those, that's the true miracle. And this particular moment right now is a true miracle. As Layman Pong said, here are my supernatural powers, chopping wood and drawing water. Anything we do. Right? But we can really be swayed by these things that we read in the sutras and not look beneath the surface. And then if you look even deeper, you can see that the sutra itself is not making a big deal about these in a way, right? It was very pragmatic, very expedient. It's a very expedient means. The Buddha told, well, the mother told the sons to do this to purify the mind of their fathers. And if you imagine this, you're a father and you see your sons sailing up into the air and doing all of these things, and they come down and they're asking you if they can leave home. You would say, hey, whatever you want. You want to start a Krispy Kreme donut shop, you want a franchise, you name it. I'm very impressed. But the father was impressed, and what he the first question out of his mouth after he sees this was, "Who is your teacher? Whose disciples are you?" Right. So he's not saying, "Wow, I want to do that too." In a sense, the sutra is showing that what has happened is his mind has opened up. And so the thing for us to understand, I think, in encountering this sutra is to not be confused between wow power, that's these supernatural things, and how power. The how is how things are done, how we help other sentient beings, how we progress on the path. All of those hows are contained in these little rubrics of the paramitas and the Brahma Viharas and the 37 aids. They don't seem as flashy or sexy as these dazzling kind of displays. And we shouldn't be swayed by these sort of things and see what the real thing is. And the sutra is not impressed because, as I said, the king just wants to know who the teacher is, and the sons don't come down from doing that and saying, "We're pretty cool, huh? Look at what we just did." The sons, as great as their spiritual attainment is, still want to follow the Buddha, still want to master the Lotus Sutra. They do not see that they themselves have accomplished everything that could be accomplished. So that's another important thing to see. And I think this is also a very good lesson in terms of recognizing what sways us, what enables us, and what motivates us to go and practice. Oftentimes, it's not the purest of motives that initially will get us in. I know that Guogu tells the story of how he thought that he could do some really fancy kung fu moves if he started to study the Dharma. And that was, his entrance into, what became an amazing scholarly and Dharma career and life. And I think, and actually just to continue this theme, because I think it's quite important, I just want to contextualize it in a more Western sense. Of course, there's the ever famous scene from The Wizard of Oz, where the true Oz, the true self, who is, as it turns out, is really a fine man who's lost in the world of Oz, but he's insecure in himself, so he has to put on this display. And when he's found out, the famous lines, "Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain." There's another example, which I think is really a remarkable metaphor from the novel Charlotte's Web, which is about animals on a farm who all of whom can speak English, so they're pretty talented to begin with. But the hero, or one of the main protagonists, Wilbur, is a pig and he's about to be slaughtered. So in order to help him, Charlotte, who is a spider, weaves a web just above his thigh, which says, "Fantastic, terrific pig," pointing down at Wilbur. And at one point in the story, one person says, "I don't know, I think it's probably a fantastic, terrific spider," because that's who actually did what was happening, who did the rather remarkable thing of making this announcement. And then someone says, "No, it looks just like a regular gray spider, nothing to write home about." So this is a point of how we can really get swayed by what we're seeing and what we're not seeing. And that kind of obfuscation is something that our practice is about, of cutting through that. And so we can, arrive at a point where the real transformation that we're looking for is one where we're not relying, we're not referencing our attachments, because our conceptions have the nature to persevere, and reality has the nature to change. And we're never quite on board with this, right? And as Pema Chodron put this in another way, there's a disconnect between our ideas and our good intentions and the nitty-gritty details of a situation. So we often have some idea of how we're doing, and there is a way where it's important to have a certain recognition of what we are doing, but the issue is getting caught on that. And so then we can transform expectation, despair, judgment, and shame, or abandon them. Not get caught up with ideas of duality, of ego or non-ego. And so what the sutra is really showing, as I've come to read it over these actually couple of years, it's showing the workings of our mind in very, very subtle ways. If you look and search for the li, the principle within it, which turns out to be suchness itself, all inclusivity, wondrous existence. And so once again, the idea that things are real is dualistic, and the idea that things are not real are also dualistic. And within all that, we can still offer our help where we can, and see that suffering transcends our notions of reality and non-reality in trying to accord with and harmonize with sentient beings. And then we can, through practice and through reading the sutra and contemplation, many other things, we can develop this a don't know mind, which is a mind that is clear and in the moment. And there's this famous passage from the Book of Serenity with Dizang and Fa Yen speaking to one another. They're Dharma brothers. And Dizang asked Fa Yen, "Where are you going?" Fa Yen said, "Around on pilgrimage." And Dizang said, "What is the purpose of pilgrimage?" And Fa Yen said, "I don't know." And then Dizang said, "Not knowing is nearest or most intimate." Sometimes it's translated as. So we are clearest to the moment when we're not caught up in the productions of our mind. And as the Lankavatara Sutra says, that we should be very clear about what is projected in our mind and see that it has no nature, and even abandon ideas of arising, sustaining, and passing away. And it's all the things that we think are the constructs and the underpinnings of reality. We can see beyond that, not necessarily discarding it, because we're dealing in the real world with people on an everyday basis. So now I'd like to go back to the sutra. How are we doing for not doing bad on time? Let's see. So let me go and share the screen again. Okay. So I will read some of this and summarize. So in this first paragraph, the father is saying that he does want to see the teacher, and he's asking them to go with him, and now they say, this is the end of this paragraph, our royal father has now come to believe and understand he is fully capable of conceiving a desire for Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. We have finished doing the Buddha's work, and one translation has the Buddha's business, which I really like, which is Forscher, right? For the sake of our father, we beg that our mother will permit us to go to the place where the Buddha is to leave the household life and practice the way. And there's a poem that summarizes that. And then over here, we're beginning with the two sons. They say, excellent father and mother, and we beg you in due time to go to the palace where Buddha, cloud, thunder, sound, constellation, king, flower, wisdom is, and attend him in person and offer alms. Why? Because encountering the Buddha is as difficult as encountering the Udambara flower, which is very rare. I don't know if there really is something in reality, but it's in the sutras. And so this is also a very important part. And encountering the Buddha is very close to, or maybe the same as, encountering the Dharma, which we're doing now. This is a very rare occasion, and the sons are aware of this. And they give this very famous metaphor. As difficult it is for a one-eyed turtle to encounter a floating log with a hole in it, and as the sutras say, and put his or her head through the hole, right? So we have been blessed with great good fortune from past existences, and so have born in an age where we can encounter the Buddha's Dharma. For this reason, our father and mother should permit us to leave the household life. Why? Because the Buddhas are difficult to encounter, and the proper time is also hard to come upon. And I'm going to skip this next paragraph and go to over here, where in this paragraph, the Buddha just the narration talks about all of the various samadhis and attainments and escape from evil realms of existence that people underwent in receiving this transmission. And so now it says, at that time, the Buddha preached the Dharma for the sake of the king, instructing him and bringing him benefit and joy. The king was exceedingly delighted. And at that time, King Wonderful Adornment and his queen removed from their necks necklaces of pearls worth hundreds and thousands and scattered them over the Buddha. In midair, the necklaces changed into a jeweled dais. Sometimes it's translated as platform or terrace, with 4 pillars. On the dais was a large jeweled couch spread with hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of heavenly robes. Seated cross-legged on them was a Buddha who emitted a brilliant light. So let's just talk about this. This is kind of a tantric insertion in the sutra, in the way that the last chapter that we read, Dharanis, can be explained as epitomizing the apotheosis, right, of the teaching encased in a syllable, or in a group of syllables. But here, this is something that one could use as a visualization to see all of these things, and as a way of stopping the mind from wandering. But there's also a deeper meaning in this. The necklaces appear over 40 times in the Lotus Sutra. But it's only in chapters 24 and 25 when they seem to have this significance of an ultimate kind of dana, an ultimate kind of generosity, an offering of a bodhisattva to the Buddha. And these kinds of offering are acknowledgement of what the Buddha and all the Buddhas and all of our teachers have given to us. And it's acknowledgement that the repayment of what we've been given is really impossible, but it's our recognition and the change of our attitude towards the practice, which is important. Also, the pearls in and of themselves are often symbolic of wisdom. And when they're taken off, both the king and the queen, that's kind of symbolic of taking off of attachment, of an ego configuration. And then the pearls scatter over the Buddha. So the wisdom is transformed into something that we can't even describe. And the dais, almost like the room of the Buddha in chapter 10, could be symbolic of the generosity and the benevolence of the Buddha. And the robes are also sometimes symbolic of the paramitas themselves. And so here there are hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of heavenly robes and a seated cross-legged Buddha emitting light, hearkening back to the opening of the sutra, which is what the Buddha did right in the introductory chapter. And I think when we encounter these kind of images in the sutra, we can look at them and try not to do what I just did here and try to kind of do a literary analysis, which is really what I'm trying not to do in a way, but just to show that there are deeper levels that we can counter this on. And there's also this give and take that's happening throughout the Lotus Sutra, of the teachings being presented and people gratefully and humbly accepting it. Also, what this shows is gratitude, in its purest form, and in ways that can't be described conceptually, so it is shown visually. So just the way the Dharani is a kind of oral, a sound, or oral coming from the mouth way of practicing, so is this visualization. And then another important part to understand is the king's, at that time, the king, wonderful Dharma, thought to himself, the Buddha's body is rare indeed, extraordinary in dignity and adornment, constituting a form of utmost subtlety and wonder. And then the Buddha, cloud, thunder, sound, constellation, king, flower, wisdom spoke to the four kinds of believers, saying, do you see the king, wonderful adornment, who stands before me with his palms pressed together? In the midst of my Dharma, this king will become a monk and a Buddha. And I'm not going to go into the pronouncement of his name and his Buddha land or whatever, but there's also this connection of showing our innate Buddha nature actually blossoming, flourishing, and that's in the flowers often in their names, and earlier in the Lotus Sutra, in chapter 5, it talks about renhuai, human flowers, human flowering, and what, of course, is flowering is our Buddha nature, and this is being shown by this prophecy that the Buddha is giving to King Wonderful Adornment. And then what happens, of course, is the king immediately turned over his kingdom to his younger brother, and he himself, along with his queen, his two sons, and all their attendants in the midst of the Buddha's Dharma, renounced the household life to practice the way. So this is a very wholesome family affair. Everyone is going to follow the Buddha. And there has been a rather remarkable transformation in him. And then, of course, one of the things that the Lotus Sutra does time and time again is where you might think, okay, he's really made it to Buddhahood. There's nothing more to do. But that was just a prophecy at that time, whenever that time happened to be. So then it says, after the king had left the household life for the space of 84,000 years, he constantly applied himself with diligence, practicing the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful Dharma. So that's 84,000 years. So even with his utter commitment to the Buddha and with the prophecy, he still is practicing. And then when this period had passed, those are my italics, he gained the samadhi of the adornment of all pure benefits. And now he is rising into the air, the height of 7 tala trees. And so once again, you can see how this kind of a display is really just a manifestation of quiet and sincere practice. The samadhi is, as I said before, generated by and product of the true practicing, and this is shown so that we ordinary sentient beings can see it. So he's rising to the height of 7 tall trees, and he addressed the Buddha saying, "World honored one, these 2 sons of mine have carried out the Buddha's work, employing transcendental powers and transformation to turn my mind away from heresies." After 84,000 years, right? So we can give ourselves a break if we find our minds are not doing exactly what we'd like them to do, which of course that desire, that desire to transform a moment, the present moment, into something that it isn't, that's one of our issues that we can address with this sense of great doubt, great wonder, of don't know mind. So we can see what's happening in our minds all the time, and who knows what's in store for us when we become kings in the future, or if maybe we were in the past, who knows? And then this is another remarkable thing also in the Lotus Sutra. At the end of this paragraph, these 2 sons have been good friends, right? Shanzheshur in Chinese, Kalyamitra in Sanskrit, to my past existences. And he's aware of this now, and to enrich and benefit from me. And he realized it, and for that reason, they were born into my household. So there is this really interbeing that happened within his household. Whose karma was it, if you will? The sons to be born there, or his karma to be born and to be a follower of the Brahmanical religion and to attract the sons. So the idea of discernible cause and effect is really questioned, if you will. So, then the Buddha cloud thunder sound says to the King Wonderful Adornment, just so, just so. It is as you have said. If good men and women have planted good roots, and as a result in existence and after existence have been able to gain good friends, right? We know earlier in the Pali Canon, when Ananda approaches the Buddha and says, "World honored one, I've heard that friendship is half of the practice." And the Buddha says, "No, Ananda, don't say that. Friendship is 100% of the practice." And friendship by extension, is this way that we're all connected, this interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh would say. So then these good friends can do the Buddha's work, right? The Buddha is our boss, teaching, benefiting, delighting, and enabling them to enter Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Great King, you should understand that a good friend is the great cause and condition by which one is guided and led, and which enables one to see the Buddha and to conceive the desire for Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. So once again, here we're really looking at true supernatural power. Friendship. Simple in some ways, complex in others, but so we're not dazzled by superficialities, no matter how wondrous they are. The Buddha is talking about planting good roots, and this is something that we can do in any given moment. All right, that's what's so wonderful about the practice. It's not like there's some exam, in 10 years that you have to pass in order to enter on the path. The path is right here. So then he continues, Great King, do you see these two sons? They have already offered alms to Buddhas equal in number to the sands of a great number, and they have drawn near to them with reverence and in the presence of those Buddhas who have accepted and upheld the Lotus Sutra, thinking with compassion of living beings who embrace heretical views and causing them to abide in correct views. And this idea of having given offerings to so many Buddhas in the past, this is a way of affirming the lineage that we are all a part of. So it's timeless what we're connected to, both vertically in time and horizontally in space. And then in the next paragraph, I see we're coming towards the end of the time. So the king then praises the physical body of the Buddha, and of course, doing that is really a gateway into the three bodies of the Buddha. This is not just the Nirmanakaya, the manifestation body, but it's the reward body and the Dharmakaya, the true Buddha itself. But this is being given to us once again as a kind of visualization. There's much behind it, and then I've highlighted this sort of at the end of the next paragraph. From finally, King Wonderful Adornment says, from this day on, I will no longer follow the whims of my own mind, nor will I give way to heretical views or to arrogance, anger, or other evil states of mind. Which is something we can try out now, which is not that easy. And then here is kind of the payoff, if you will, in this last paragraph. The Buddha, now this is Shakyamuni speaking, and now we're back in the present time, so to speak, where the chapter began. So what is your opinion? Is this King Wonderful Adornment someone unknown to you? And in fact, he is none other than the present Bodhisattva, Flower of Virtue. And his queen, Pure Virtue, is Bodhisattva Light Shining Adornment Marks, who is now in the Buddha's presence. Out of pity and compassion for King Wonderful Adornment and his attendants, he was born in their midst. And the king's two sons are the present Bodhisattvas, Medicine King and Medicine Superior. These Bodhisattvas, Medicine King and Medicine Superior, have already succeeded in acquiring great benefits. And of course, Medicine King has appeared a number of times earlier in the sutra. Tens of thousands of billions of Buddhas, and they have planted numerous roots of virtue and acquired inconceivable good benefits. And if there are persons who are acquainted with the names of these two Bodhisattvas, the heavenly and human beings of all the world will surely do obeisance to them. And this is also another underlying theme in this chapter, is the medicine of the Dharma. And Medicine King is kind of the doctor, and Medicine Superior represents the medicine itself. Once again, we're always seeing like wisdom and compassion. You know, the wisdom, knowledge, and the operative, performative way of having that wisdom actually do good in the world. And then this is the end of the sutra, of the chapter. When the Buddha preached this chapter, the former affairs of King Wonderful Adornment, 84,000 persons removed themselves from the dust and defilement, and with respect to the various phenomena, attained the pure Dharma I. So that, once again, is much more to say, but let me just give the ending of the liturgy. May the virtuous merits adorn and purify the pure land of the Buddhas. Upwardly, we repay the 4 layers of gratitude. Downwardly, we alleviate the suffering of the 3 destinies. May those who see and hear the Dharma generate Bodhi mind, exhausting this body of retribution. May we be reborn in the land of extreme bliss. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Harry. That was great. Do you want to take questions?
I'm here all day.
Okay. All right. Yeah. If people are, I guess we'll continue to open for another 10 minutes if people have questions. If not, then we will conclude today's talk. Okay, looks everyone's got enlightened, Harry.
Everyone got enlightened. Well, give people give people a chance. It's quite a lot to absorb and see how much is really going on in that chapter, and especially how it's part of the culmination of the whole sutra. So the power of the words and the the deeper meaning is really profound. Okay, I see some people have to go, which I totally understand. And once again, I'm very grateful to be able to do this and to share this. And I find that in presenting the sutra like this, it's really a wonderful journey. And as I said, I'm very grateful to all the people who accompany me.
Yep. And okay, I guess if you have questions.
Miranda has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Miranda.
Wonderful.
Amitofo.
Amitofo.
Harry, as grateful as you are to be giving this talk, I am very grateful to have the opportunity to listen to your wisdom. My question is, for the supernatural powers of these princes, I guess to put it in today's terms, trying to apply the Dharma in our daily lives, like for example, having no duality, and being able to accept everything that arises and fades, that in itself is a supernatural power that we should aim, that should be our practice.
Yes.
What's
I couldn't agree more. But remember, I think that I totally agree with you, but remember, the supernatural is quite ordinary and the ordinary is quite supernatural. So we don't want to get caught up in attaching to thinking what we should or shouldn't do, and recognize, I think it's very important for us to be gentle with ourselves and with others, and to recognize what our capacities are, and that way we can ripen. Milarepa said, "Hasten slowly." So we ripen at our own pace. Thank you, Miranda.
And thank you, Harry. Amitofo.
Amitofo. Echo.
Hey, Ari.
Hey, Echo.
Wonderful talks once again. I just thought it's so amazing that this chapter really transcends time, right? We're talking about present, future, and the past of this, using this particular family members to illustrate of that. You know, and it just shows that practice is just not like this present lifetime. It's continuously, and it actually connection from the previous lifetimes. So it illustrates in this chapter very clearly how every moment of your practice, every moment of your putting your effort into practice will not go wasted. It is just continuously, it will until you reach Buddhahood. And I thought it's very encouraging. At the same time, also, it is talking, this particular chapter is really encouraging the lay people, right? Mm-hmm. Using this lay people's family, illustrating how great this family members, even to that point that the king itself, they're still trying to help their father. It's just kind of harmonious, kind of together, a family helping each other's members to be progressing in the path. It's really moving to see that as well. So and it almost like, even though our eyes are sort of shined on these kind of miraculous sort of this kind of performance by these two sons, but it seems also the chapter doesn't really sort of highlight that
exactly
part.
Yes.
And also it also illustrates that when we try to convince someone, we need to know what exactly they need to hear or see from us, so they will be able to convince by us. So this chapter, even though the son using this miraculous kind of performance, but to us, we may not use we may use different things. We use different, gesture, kindness, or just cook a meal for someone. Maybe you'll be able to help the person to move forward. So it really is illustrate. Skillful means you need to know who you are trying to really help, and what they really need to hear, need to see from you, from the deepest heart of yours. So that's just some.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, the skillful means that's the Lotus Sutra's middle name, and yeah, cooking a meal, just smiling to people on the street. You never know. Just anything, to brighten someone's day. And then your comment about time. I know Emily Dickinson has a poem that forever is composed of nows. And you could also say that nows are composed of forevers, right? This idea, we have a limited understanding of what even a single lifetime is. It's something that we often encounter with fear, right? I know there's Mickey Rooney, this actor, said that everybody likes to talk about long life, but nobody likes to talk about old age, right? So we have ideals in our minds, and we get hung up on those. And once again, the Lotus Sutra is just a great. It's like the sword of wisdom cutting through our attachments and our concepts and the way that we tend to cognize about the world. So thank you, Echo.